This is my handmade dress. It's beautiful and I love it so much, but it needs an accessory. These are the materials that I am inspired by. First up, I have this beautiful hand spun, also hand dyed by me, Cheviot wool yarn. I just finished this spin and I still have some of it on my spindles. When this gets plied, I'll have basically 2 of these. And then I have these absolutely stunning Masham locks. I picked these up at the Wisconsin Sheep and Wool Festival from the vendor called Sheeps and Me. Even though I've been inspired and had this idea for a little while, I've been a little bit nervous to go forward with it, just because it could be disastrous if I run out of materials. I mean, this is very, very one-of-a-kind stuff that I'm working with here. It's not like I can run out to the craft supply yarn aisle and find anything that would be like that, because I dyed it and spun it myself. Nerves aside, I do think that sometimes when I create a project and there's some kind of a constraint or framework that I have to work within for that project, I really do think that sometimes that can really wake up my creativity, and it can be an exciting journey to do that. A little like walking on the edge kind of thrill, but with yarn. I think yarn's exciting. Maybe you do too. I mean, you're here with me, right? So, hello fiber friend. I'm Evie, this is the Jelly and Eve channel, and today I'm designing a hand-woven scarf to go with my handmade dress out of hand-spun yarn. It's really hands-on. A few weeks ago, my stepsister got married. It was a beautiful ceremony in the Newberry Library in Chicago, and then afterwards we walked to a nearby restaurant where we had a garden party brunch. I need you to see this owl pin. Isn't he adorable? Well, I'm home. I went to the wedding. It was beautiful. And I wore my dress. And look at this centerpiece. Everything was just gorgeous. And I loved being there in my dress. It was such a lovely time, but I had nothing to wear to a garden party wedding, so I had to make something. The pattern that I followed was Simplicity 9643. This is the plus size version. There's also the straight size version, 9642. I also found a sewing channel on YouTube called Inside the Hem. They did the 4-2 version of this dress, but they did it as a sew along, and so they had video tutorials and everything for all of the different quirks and little interesting bits of this dress. I can tell you that sewing this stretch knit velvet almost destroyed my will to sew. But I did get to know my serger, and my invisible zipper on the back is so impeccable that I think I will sew again another day. And these sleeves are amazing. Do you see, there's sleeve head is in here and it keeps the sleeve poofed up. I'm not even sure how much of this you can really see. There we go. Because of the way this fabric catches the light, it's so cool. But while I was wearing this at the wedding, I really was feeling like I needed some kind of an accessory to go along with it. And I started dreaming about a hand woven scarf, and that is when I remembered a picture I saw years ago on the internet somewhere. Can't find it. I've spent hours trying to find this picture again. It's lost on the internet. They say the internet is forever. That's true, unless there's something that you're specifically looking for that you saw 10 years ago. In that case, it is lost in the void. Anyway, this scarf was stunning. It had locks that dangled down off of one side of the scarf, and the rest of the scarf was woven. I've wanted to recreate that scarf ever since. I'm fairly certain that person was using a Accessory kind of weave to do that project. It didn't have a pattern, they were just freestyling. but it was stunning. It was so beautiful. And these locks are just absolutely inspiring me to do something. Like, look at this. Look at that. And with this yarn, now imagine going all the way around with these locks dangling down. The coolest, the coolest, the coolest, the coolest. But here's the thing. I cannot envision how to put locks into the kind of scarf that I want to weave. I don't know if there's some technique that I'm missing, maybe so, but I keep trying to think about how it would work. Let me explain. If you've never woven before, stick with me. This will be very, very easy to understand. I'm going to show you exactly what I'm talking about. As you weave, you are essentially going over some threads, under some threads, all the way across. The threads that you are going over and under are called the warp, and the thread that is going back and forth is called the weft, because we go warp speed ahead and we weave from right to weft. So when you are putting your warp into the weft threads and you beat it down, that last line of warp is called the fell line. Now, if you start putting something bulky into that web of woven material, especially if you're putting that bulky thing only on one side of what you're weaving, you are going to stack up thicker on one side than you are on the other, which is going to cause your fell line to become diagonal, and it's not going to weave evenly. It can become a mess. Now, Saori weaving is a different style of weaving, and I think that's how that person was able to accomplish this look that I'm going for. That has different rules in that there are no rules. But what I want to do with the multi-shaft kind of weaving that I want to do with this, I can't just put the locks in there because I'll have something like this and it won't work. So I need to figure out what to do. So here's my plan. I am going to weave with the Cricket Quartet. I do sell these in my shop if you're interested. What it is a rigid head loom, which is the Cricket, and an attachment that turns it into a multi-shaft table loom, which is the Quartet. So they can be purchased separately, but you need to purchase the Cricket if you're going to put the Quartet attachment on it. I do have these in my shop, and I will have it linked below. The thing I like about the Cricket Quartet is its size. I can sample a project and I'm not going to waste yards and yards and yards of fiber. I don't have yards to waste, but I do need to experiment a little bit to figure out how these locks are going to work into this project. And the Quartet is perfect for that. Next, I want to extend this yarn. I probably have enough to do one scarf. It might be a little short and narrow, but if I add another yarn in there, then I can extend that material by a lot. I dug around in my stash and I couldn't find anything. So I took a trip up to Kenosha and went to the Fiddlehead yarn store. I found this yarn. Oh my gosh, the color. If this is the colorway, it's called Igor. It is superwash merino. It's the perfect color. So we're going with it. So I've solved two problems. I'm going to sample, that calms my nerves a little bit, and I'm going to use Igor, which will extend my hand spun. So I've taken a little bit of the pressure off of not having enough materials. But next we need to solve the problem of the construction of this. I went digging through all of my weaving books, and then I realized that there's actually something on my loom right now that could be part of the solution. So that was in front of me all along. If it was a snake, it would have jumped up and bit my nose. Has anyone ever heard that saying? Here's what I'm weaving. This project that I'm weaving came from a 4-part series of woven pieces from Just Yarn called Loda. It's designed by Ariana E. Funk. And for those weaving nerds out there, this pattern is a drop draw pattern, also known as huckaback. As I weave, I alternate the thinner weft with the thicker weft, and what that will do is give texture to the surface of the weave. You might be saying, Evie, what texture? I see no texture. That's because I warped this upside down. My other loom is a jack loom, and I was so used to flipping patterns around for my jack loom that I forgot to not flip it for my counterbalance tie up. So it's upside down, but that's okay. It's still weaving up great, and I'll enjoy the other side when I get to take it off the loom. But the thing about this that inspired me to try it with locks is that we've got this thicker stuff. It just runs all the way across. And then the thinner stuff builds up, and then we run it with the thick stuff. And the locks could be the thick stuff, and I could just run it all the way across. And that might be the solution I need. My idea is not going to work. Last night I stayed up way too late. I went through all my weaving books. I went through the internet, the whole internet, the actual whole entire internet, or at least all the stuff I could find on weaving and forums and Pinterest. I was up way too late. I was eating dinner with Mark last night. Mark is not a weaver. He's a vicarious fiber friend, but he doesn't actually do any of these things hands-on. But we were chatting and talking, and I told him what I was trying to do, and he said, why don't you just attach the locks after you've woven the scarf? And I was like, because they have to be part of the weaving. And then I kind of came to the realization that perhaps I'm making this more complicated than it needs to be, which I've never done before, ever in my whole entire life. Ever. So I don't know where that's coming from. This is one of my favorite shawls. And look at all that fringe on there. All this fringe was added after I had woven the shawl. The shawl was done on my tri-loom. As it was still on the loom under tension, I went around and with a crochet hook pulled all that fringe through the little open triangles. It's such a beautiful shawl. And this could easily be locks. What if I skipped a warp thread or two on one side of the scarf, and then while it was still under tension, as it was being woven, I could just attach the locks, but keeping that fell line even to keep all of the fabric stable and have a beautiful design and not get skewed too much. Would that work? I think it might. When my hair goes up, you know we're getting very serious. I found a weaving pattern that I like, that I want to work with. It is, I wrote this down. It's from A Manual of Weave Construction by Ivo Kastenek, published in English in 1903. I modified weaving draft number 446. I changed the tie-ups to make diagonal lines through the pattern just because I thought it was pretty and I liked it. I did find the pattern searching through handweaving.net. They have the book there, but it's also available through the Library of Congress. Obviously, it's an old book. So I think it's really cool that I ended up with a weaving pattern from a book that's from 1903 or earlier, I guess, in the original Austrian. So because this pattern is similar to a twill, I am going to use floating selvages. I'm going to put one of them a little further out, and that's what will allow me some room to put my locks in that empty space. I didn't want to get out my whole warping board just to do a yard of warp, so I devised a clever solution. I'm using my ankle loom as my warping board. Clever, clever. And I have my cross right over here, and it's working out. So I've got a few more warps to warp, and then I'll be able to warp my loom. To explain a little bit what I'm doing here, The pattern has a grid across the top of it, and the loom has 4 shafts. Each row in that grid represents a shaft, and each black dot represents a thread. So the first thread is going to go in shaft number 4. The second thread is going to go in shaft number 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then 2, and then 1. And the pattern of putting the threads into these different shafts will show up as I pull the levers and raise the shafts in different orders. And that will give me my beautiful weaving pattern. It's not working. My weft is way too thin. I had a feeling once I saw it warped up that it wasn't gonna work, but I had to try it anyway because I got this far. But here's what the issue is. You can kind of see the diagonal lines, but over here, nothing. It's so squished down, you can't tell that anything exciting is happening. I looked at this section here though with this brown. That brown is just a Cascade 220. I used it just to kind of get things started and even out. But you can see the warp threads through that, which means that I might be able to save it if I use a bulky yarn. So we'll look at some of my bulky hand spins in just a moment. But here's what is working. Check out the lock. That is working. The idea of putting a floating warp on the edge, that just means that this warp on the edge isn't connected to a heddle, so it doesn't go up and down. So that's my floating warp, and I put it out a little further than I normally would, so there's this gap running this whole way just on this one side, and so that gave me space to get a little crochet hook in there and pull the lock through and give me a dangling lock, and I'm thrilled. So we've got some things working. We have some things that need work. I think I can fix this with a bulkier yarn. I have this 3-ply. This is leftover from a crochet cardigan I made. This might work. Then I have this from, I think it was a year ago, October Paradise Fibers, and it has all of those autumny colors that I'm looking for. I think this is called Neptune. Yep, Neptune. And then I have just straight orange merino, but it's boring. It looks okay with the locks. It looks okay because it's got this orange, but I don't know. This orange loses its punch, I feel, if there's too much orange happening. So there is some purple kind of burgundy in here. I think this is the one. Let's try this and see how it looks with a bulkier yarn. I think I can at least say that my selvages look really good. I have it figured out. I had the warp as these dark thread colors in here, and I need to reverse it. It's real simple. I can put everything up. So I just took the whole thing and I flipped it upside down, because what was down is now up and what was up is now down. I'm going to switch to the orange, and I think this is going to be the one. Well, I think I figured out how I like this fabric to be. This texture is amazing. And the floats with the purple behind the orange, it just looks stunning. And it's gonna go great with my dress. But the final question is, did I leave enough room to squeeze some of these locks in there to have a fringe along the length of the selvage? I skipped a few slots in the heddle, had a floating selvage, so there should be enough room. I'm just sticking a crochet hook down in there, pulling up a loop. That is the beauty of these locks being so long. There's enough room to pull them on through, and they look absolutely stunning. What do you think of this fabric, and what do you think of this idea? I am a little concerned that the selvage thread, the one thread that's holding all these locks, really needs to be very, very sturdy. So I think when I do the full version of this, I'm going to possibly double or triple that up, just to make sure, because at this point, if the fringe pulled on it too hard or something, it snagged and broke, all that fringe is going to fall off of there. There's a lot riding on that one little yarn, that one little thread. So that would be the thing I would change, but oh my goodness, it's beautiful. This came out great. There's enough room. It's not affecting the fell line. It's not making things go diagonal. It's beautiful. I can't wait to do a full-size version of this. Let me know what you would have chosen. Would you have gone with the yarn I did? Would you have tried to stick with the variegated? What do you think of this project? Happy spinning, happy weaving. I'll see you in the next one.